in week 2 of the series called Baseline, where we're looking at the book of Galatians, which we're going to be working through for a little bit here. So join us at home. Read through this on your own as well. When Paul, who's the writer of Galatians, starts the book, the very first thing he does, this is amazing, the very first thing he does is he talks about how important the gospel is. And he talks about how there were some people that were trying to add to it. Glenn referred to this last week as Gospel Plus. Now, because he starts there, we wanted last week to define, here's what the gospel is. Like, here's what we mean when we say that. Because if I were to go throughout this congregation and just be like, tell me what you think the gospel is, I bet you'd find that over time I'd get like 31 flavors of perspectives and answers on that. If I start to include every church, every place, it starts to get pretty big. And so we wanted to really narrow that and say, okay, here's what this is. So last week, Glenn talked about the gospel this way. He went to Mark and looked at how did Jesus describe it. And in the end, the way we'd summarize it is this, that because of Jesus, right, the word gospel, Greek word euangelion, just means the good news. Here's what the good news is. Because of Jesus, life and relationship with God is available to you. That's it. It's the simplicity of the gospel. Because of Jesus, life and relationship with God is available to you. If you're going, wait, what? Go back and listen to last week's talk. I'd love you to do that. But he talked about how the gospel isn't something that just saves us or that we start with. It's something that we live by. We base our life on this. And so the way you base your life on this is by you put your faith and trust in the truth that Jesus is with you, right? Moving through you, working around you. And so God is working through you, moving around you because you have his love and favor. There's this ongoing sense of I'm living by this reality that life with God is available, that I'm experiencing that I'm trusting Jesus for it, and that's what this looks like. Now, that's it. I know it sounds really basic. It's the simple gospel. And now, here's the thing. It sounds kind of too simple at times, and so it should be really easy to live out, right? Anything that we look and we're like, that just seems really simple. In theory, it is, but anybody who's ever tried to actually live this thing out, it gets really hard, doesn't it? Because life is wildly uncertain. Anybody who's lived long enough knows that. You probably didn't predict the path that you would be walking on even right now or the story that you'd write for your own life. Life is wildly uncertain, and this idea of moving through our lives while anchoring our full trust in relationship with Jesus Christ, it can be an uncertain venture. It's hard to do that at times. And so our tendency is to want to add to this very simple gospel, to want to put things, attach things to it. And what ends up happening is we begin to drift because all of us have a tendency, to add to it. Because maybe I was scared of something. Or maybe I felt a little insecure, uncertain, or maybe there's something else happened in culture around me and I was like, well, I'm gonna mix a little of that in with this simple gospel that matters so much. And you start to do all this stuff and the next thing you know, each and every one of us find ourselves in a place where we become slightly off, where we start steering to the left or we start steering to the right and we move away from what I would call the simple gospel. And I wanna look at that, and here's why. Because it's easier than you think. I want you to hear this. It is easier, friends, than you think to lose your alignment to the gospel. It is. This isn't insidious. This isn't a horrible thing. It's not malicious. You're not a bad person. It's just easier than you think to add something or to attach something and lose your alignment to it. And that's what I want to explore today. I want to look at a weird situation in the book of Galatians. And it is weird. I know it's weird because I went to study this. I realized all throughout history, church fathers have gotten upset over the passage we're going to read today. Historically, theologians and different stuff, and they all start to argue to try to justify what happened in this particular situation because they're uncomfortable with the fact that we're about to read a moment where two really prominent church leaders conflict with each other, right? We don't like to think of it this way, but that's what happens here. You have Paul, the Apostle Paul, and who wrote a large part of your New Testament, and you have the Apostle Peter, who wrote a part of your New Testament. These are two New Testament authors. And they're actually going to conflict with each other over something really important. And here's what it is. This is a moment where the Apostle Peter comes to recognize that even he, you guys, even he, the Apostle Peter, the one who preached the very first sermon that 3,000 people said, I want to live my life after Christ. I want to follow him and embrace that very simple gospel for my life. 3,000 people started the church on that first Pentecost day. Right? The same Apostle Peter who was the great leader over all of these churches, the one that Jesus Christ looked at and said, upon you, I'm going to name you Peter, I'm going to call you Peter, because that word means rock, because you're the rock I want to build my church on. That same Peter has to take a moment here in Galatians and recognize that even he needed to recalibrate his perspective, realign his actions, that even he had become veering off to the left or to the right instead of walking straight in the simple gospel. I want us to see that. That's a really big deal because here is the truth. If the Apostle Peter can find himself needing to recalibrate his life and perspective back to the simple gospel because it gets misaligned, what does that mean for me? And what does that mean for you? I think there's just an opportunity here for all of us, not because you're good, not because you're bad, just because life happens and every now and then we need to recenter and we need to recalibrate. And so that's what we're going to look at. Galatians chapter 2 begins at verse 11. It says this, and as I read this, when I read the word Cephas, I want you to hear the word Peter. I know that sounds weird. I'll explain it in a moment. Galatians chapter 2, verse 11 says, "But when Cephas came to Antioch, this is Paul writing, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. For before certain men came from James, which is the leader of the Jerusalem church, he was eating with the Gentiles," which are non-Jewish people. "But when they came, he drew back and separated himself, fearing the circumcision party. And the rest of the Jews acted hypocritically along with him, so that even Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy. When I saw that their conduct was not in step with the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas before them all, 'If you, though a Jew, live like a Gentile and not like a Jew, how can you then force the Gentiles to live like the Jews?'" And let's summarize what we read earlier. Paul looks and he says, look, when Peter came to the Gentile, not Jewish, but Gentile city of Antioch, right? When he came here, it was great. He comes in and everything seems really good. And then I realize something's off. And he says, so I opposed him to his face because something he was doing was wrong and it was hurting people. That's why this was like a public thing. Because it was hurting people. It was impacting a bunch of people. And then Paul keeps explaining. When he got there, it was all good. And he was eating with people. So when it says he sat at their table, this is like fellowship of a religious means. Like this is the church coming together as friends and family and people all binding themselves together because of their shared faith in Jesus Christ. Like this is a powerful thing. And it says Peter came in and he starts hanging out with everybody and he's sharing meals and he's living life and he's doing all this stuff and it all seems great. And then he starts shrinking back. That word that's used in your Bible for moving away, for separating, isn't a hard sever. It's this idea of slowly kind of moving away until you're disconnected from this thing. You're separated from it. You start shrinking back. Why? Well, it's because these other guys from the Jerusalem church, these Jewish people who thought that we should all still be living according to the law and doing these things came in and they had all these perspectives and opinions, and Peter just sort of acquiesced to all of this stuff and separates himself from all these Gentile people. And he goes, and you know what happens? The rest of the Jews see this and they start to do the same thing. And he says, even Barnabas did this. If you don't know who Barnabas is a guy who actually had devoted much of his life, he was a church leader, to planting churches in areas where Jewish people did not live. So Barnabas had created a bunch of churches and led a bunch of non-Jewish people into the very simple gospel of Jesus Christ. And even he starts to separate himself out to favor the Jewish people and move away from the non-Jewish people that were in the room, this notoriously good guy. And Paul says they're acting like hypocrites. And that's what this whole confrontation is about. See, Peter had slipped out of alignment somewhere over time. And the passage tells us why. If you're going, what did happen? Why? It's right there in the passage. It's subtle, but it says it. Galatians 2, verse 12. But when they came, these Jewish people from the Jerusalem church came, Peter drew back and separated himself. Here's why. Fearing the circumcision party. He was afraid. He was afraid. See, more often than not, when it comes to us, right, there's this beautiful thing that we embrace with our lives about this simple gospel, that life with God is available to all. And then we seek to live that out, put my faith and my trust, basing my life on Jesus, living out in relationship with him and seeing where he wants to take me and what this life is ultimately going to look like. And then you jump into your life and all of a sudden you get a little afraid. And you go, what if I need more? These other people said something different. What if they're right? What if this happens? And it starts to create this kind of insecurity in us at times. It starts to create this kind of fear. Fear's not a bad thing. You shouldn't condemn yourself for having fear. You're a human being. A fear response is really normal. If you have no fear, you're going to go do really daring things that get yourself killed all the time. I mean, once, right? You know what I mean? So fear's a really normal thing. What this is saying is don't let fear place both hands on the vehicle and start driving things. And that's what I want to finish the rest of our time here together talking about. These paths that our fear can take us down that lead us out of alignment from the simple gospel, and what can we do about that? But here's the thing. As we go to talk about this and continue forward, can I ask you, if you're sitting here right now, and as you listen to all of this, you're going, this is just an interesting thing about two religious leaders in the first century. This is just an interesting thing about Peter and Paul, and wow, that's interesting to know that, and I'm glad I learned this about Galatians. I want you to take a step inward for just a second and be open to the fact that I think, just like Peter, each and every one of us probably have an opportunity in some way, shape, or form to recalibrate our own lives, our own hearts, our own perspectives, back to the simpleness of the gospel here. Because all of us, just by every day living in this life, will have a tendency to lose our alignment. And here's why. Let's look at these three things. One, we lose alignment with the gospel when we become overly concerned with managing our reputation. We lose alignment with the gospel when we become overly concerned with managing our reputation. This is like a curse in religion, you guys. Right? When you become overly concerned with managing reputation. Galatians chapter 2, verse 12 says, "For before certain men came from James, that Jerusalem church, he, Peter, was eating with the Gentiles. But when they came, he drew back and he separated himself." As in, I don't want those people to see me at that table, because if those people see me at that table, they're going to have a whole host of assumptions and thoughts about the kind of person and leader that I am. I don't want those people to see me interacting with these people, because they're going to assume that I have all kinds of beliefs. They're going to assume that I don't take things seriously. They're going to assume all kinds of things about me. And so Peter manages his reputation, and he separates himself from the people who could tarnish it when he goes back home. This is what happens. Friends, that's Peter. Here's us, though. You know you are overly focused on managing your reputation when you place greater weight on how others see you than you do on how God sees you. That's how you know. If you're sitting in here and you're wondering, how do I know if I have a tendency to manage my reputation with other people? How do I know if that's the thing that, like, sometimes for me makes me drift or makes me move out of alignment? It's this. You place greater weight on the voices and perspectives of other people than you do on who God says you are, on who you are in Christ. And that just means there's opportunity for each and every one of us to stop managing our reputation and to recalibrate our lives back to a very simple gospel where there is love and grace and goodness and truth for each and every one of us, and where a real church gets to go arm in arm and hold one another up because Jesus is beautiful enough to handle it. He's big enough to carry it. Because that's what we're anchored in, isn't it? Friends, how many of you have ever felt, now you don't need to raise your hand, but how many of you have ever felt like if the real you came to church on a Sunday that you would cease to belong? The real you, if it came to church on a Sunday, that you would cease to belong. If that is you, I just want to tell you, your reputation is secure in Christ. The gospel is here for you. The good news is yours. Center your life on it. How many of you are exhausted from all of the work it takes to wear a mask all the time for fear of losing reputation with people around you? Because it's tiring to put that on forever. It's frustrating, and you feel diminished, and you can grow numb along the way. How many of you know what that's like? Friends, if that's you, the gospel is for you. The good news of Jesus Christ is for you. Anchor your life in it and recognize that your reputation is secure in Jesus Christ, despite what you might encounter from other people. How many of you are frustrated? Because there's a part of you that wants to be known and you want to be loved for who you are, but there's a part of you that recognizes that who you are doesn't feel like it's good enough. And you don't know where to put that in a context around other Christian people because it feels like you need to be a certain someone and play a certain part in order to be in order to be accepted. And you're frustrated and you're tired and you're exhausted. If that's you, the good news is absolutely for you. Life with relationship with God because of Jesus Christ is available to all. Anchor yourself in his love, in his grace, in his favor, in his freedom, in his acceptance, and may this place be a powerful expression of that. We can do this. It's the goodness of what lives in us, friends. Managing our reputation will lead us to value the opinions of others above the opinion of God. So if that's you, if you find yourself going, I think I have this tendency at times. I think I get caught up in managing reputation. I think that's what causes misalignment to the gospel with me. Well, then take a step towards recalibrating your life. And I think there's one that we can actually do here this morning. And it's just a moment to say something together. I want to say a sentence out loud. And then just as a moment of solidarity for all those who need to say this out loud, as a church, will you then repeat after me? Here's the sentence, and then we can repeat it together. It's this: My reputation is secure in Jesus who loves me. Now let's all say it together. Ready? My reputation is secure in Jesus who loves me. Say it as many times as it takes. Remind each other as many times as you need to, friends. It's a powerful thing. We lose alignment with the gospel and we fall into the trap of people pleasing. This one might sound really similar to this idea of managing reputation, right? Like it's similar. But for me, I see these really differently. Here's what I mean by that. You know you have a tendency toward people pleasing when you seek to keep others pleased with you at the cost of what you really think and know to be true. That's how you know this thing. So this is not like I'm sitting at a table and if they see me with these people, they're going to make these judgments about me, and so I need to manage my reputation. This is, I don't want to upset the apple cart. This is, I don't know, like these people have strong opinions or thoughts or there's conflict or the stuff, and so I'm just going to diminish who I am and kind of hide from that for a moment. I want everybody to stay okay and pleased with me, around me, so I'm just not going to be me. It's a different form of mask wearing that exists here. Galatians chapter 2, verse 13, it says, and the rest of the Jews acted hypocritically along with him. Guys, it's easy to miss this in the passage. When it turns here, the reason it says, and the rest of the Jews, this is no longer the Jews that came from Jerusalem. So this is no longer a group of people known as the Judaizers who wanted to bring all this law back in. When it says, and the rest of the Jews acted accordingly, these were the people who went to that church. These were the people who day in, day out shared life with all of these non-Jewish Christians as well. They shared dinner tables. They were friends. They probably had community and looked after one another's things. They probably contributed to help one another out. They served and loved one another. They had ongoing relationship with each other because this was their actual community. And some of their Jewish brethren from another town and a prominent church leader named Peter roll into town and start to separate themselves. And these guys feel all the tension of that particular moment. And this will cost them their reputation with their Gentile friends later. Because when those guys go back to Jerusalem, who's still left in the church, right? This is going to cost them reputation, you guys. And yet they start to just back away too. Let's not upset the apple cart. Let's keep them pleased. Let's keep everything rolling. And it's hard. They simply suppress what they really know to keep the religious people from Jerusalem pleased. See, maybe for you, you move out of alignment, or you move away from the simplicity of the gospel because you simply go along with all the thoughts and opinions of the strongest voices around you because you just don't want to upset the apple cart. And so you constantly suppress and push down and hide the things you really think and feel and know to be true. But if that's you, trust what Christ has done in you. Trust the simplicity of what it is that you stand upon. Take a moment here to recalibrate your life to the gospel by reminding yourself of the following. And I'm going to say this out loud once again, and then I'd love us to repeat it all together. And it's this. I don't have to please people because I have God's favor. Let's all say it together. I don't have to please people because I have God's favor. We'll get it next time. All right? This is huge. That word for favor, it's simply the word grace. Right? Favor is the unmerited grace of God, or grace is the unmerited favor of God. That's what it is. You have this. There's grace upon grace for you. You don't have to please everybody else. You have it. Trust it. Base your life on it. Third thing, we lose alignment with the gospel when we begin to worry we are being fooled. Galatians 2:13 says, and the rest of the Jews acted hypocritically along with him so that even Barnabas was led astray. I find myself asking this question. If Barnabas is this prominent church leader who went around starting churches for non-Jewish people in non-Jewish areas, right? In areas of Rome, for the Greeks, all these stuff. If that's what he did, how did he fall into this same mess? If these are like his people and he started these things, how did he end up in this same place? Isn't that fascinating? When you start in your own life to base your life on the simplicity of the gospel, and when you try to live that and you try to describe that to other people, at times it just feels, well, really simple. Base your life on Jesus Christ, that he died for you, that he rose again for you, that you're forgiven, and he loves you, and there's grace for you, and that he's with you. And base your life, your everyday life, your decisions, and who you are, and just the way you move forward in this life on that reality, and just trust it. See where it takes you. Go. What's going to happen as you go to live that, you're going to step into wildly uncertain moments. You're going to have moments where you go, yeah, but do I go through door number 1 or door number 2? Is it option A or is it option B? Or there's these people and I don't want to screw my life up or their life up and I don't know quite what to do in this situation and I can't find a verse that exactly answers this one thing and I'm not quite sure what to do about it. And there's all of this uncertainty that life just inevitably brings upon us. You cannot avoid it. It's just a part of being a human being who lives. And then in those moments, here's what's going to happen. If it hasn't happened already, it will. If it's happened once, it'll happen again. Someone's going to come along with a really strong voice and a really certain perspective who seems like they have a lot of security and a lot of just forthrightness. And they're going to look at you and they're going to say, what you need to be doing is ... What you need to be doing, if you want to know that you're right with God and that you're doing the right thing in your life, is you need to stop doing this and you need to start doing that. You need to let go of this and you need to grab a hold of that. You need to base your life and follow these things and do this stuff. And if you do these things and if you follow that and if you live your life this way, then you're going to be okay. It's going to be a religious person who does this at some point in time. And all of that certainty and all of that fervor and all of that tenacity is going to leave you in a space where you look and you go, I mean, they seem really secure. And that seems really potent. And they seem like they're really going for it. And while you're standing there in the midst of trying to live by faith and navigate the uncertainty of the moment while holding the certainty of Jesus, you're going to find yourself in a place where that strong voice becomes really powerful and really attractive. And you'll ask yourself, wait, I know I've been living by the simple gospel. Am I being fooled? Does God want more from me? Am I doing this wrong? Have I been duped? Did somebody tell me something over time that's like messed me up? Like, am I? Because I don't feel certain and secure as that person does, and they seem like they've got a path carved out. Let me tell you what Paul says immediately following this incident. We'll close with it. Galatians chapter 2, verse 16, he says, yet we know, this is Paul speaking, yet we know that a person is not justified by works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ. So we also have believed in Christ Jesus in order to be justified by faith in Christ, not by works of the law, because by works of the law, no one will be justified. If you've tuned out, tune in as we close the service here today. This is the whole point. This is the big idea. If you get what Paul is saying here, I promise this will be a huge deal as you seek to live a life of faith. What he is saying here is that regardless of what anybody else tells you, regardless of who sits at your table or not, regardless of who demands that your behavior look a certain way for them to feel comfortable around you or not, regardless of whether someone has an expectation that you be the right kind of Christian, the right kind of religious person, even when someone around you seems like they have it all figured out and want you to go with them, regardless of all of those things, and you're still sitting confused, if you put your trust in Jesus to save you, to be with you, to lead you, to love you, you are in the best place that you could possibly be. If you want to recalibrate your life to the truth of the simple gospel, then before you listen to anyone else, including me, the irony is not lost on me, your friends. Center your life on Jesus. Trust that he is in you, he is with you, and that he is for you. And as a step in closing towards recalibrating that all together, one more thing to repeat. I'll say it first, and we can all say it together. It's this. My life is secure in Jesus Christ. Ready? My life is secure in Jesus Christ.